Hi, everybody. I'm excited because I am here today with my friend Nancy Levin, who has written not one, not two, but three books for Hay House and is currently working on number 4. So, book number 1, Jump and Your Life Will Appear. Book number 2, Worthy, Boost Your Self-Worth to Grow Your Net Worth. And the book that just came out that we want to talk about is The New Relationship Blueprint.
Woohoo!
10 Steps to Reframe the Way You Love. I'm very excited about this one. It's your first hardcover.
It is my first hardcover, and doesn't it feel so good?
Yeah, it does. It has a really nice feel to it. And I remember the day that you told me it was gonna be hardcover. You were so excited.
I know. I was so excited. It felt like, okay, I've arrived.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's like a big deal because it costs a lot more money for them to do that. So they have to have a lot of confidence in the book for them to make it a hardcover.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was one of those things where it was like they were showing their investment in me.
Yeah, yeah. And they even decided to do that before they saw the manuscript, right?
They did.
They didn't know how good the book was.
Yes, they didn't know
until later, and then they were like, "Oh, good, we were right."
It did help that the editor and publisher at Hay House did say that it was my best book, she thought, so that helped.
Yes. Well, I certainly think so. For those of you who don't know, I work with Nancy on her books. I help her out, and I want to just talk about ghost writing a little just for a second, because I think a lot of people just for a second, I think a lot of people don't understand what a ghostwriter really is.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think they think the ghostwriter goes off and writes the book and the author really doesn't have anything to do with it, which is absolutely false. And so the analogy that we've been using is that the author is the designer and the ghostwriter is the seamstress. And it's a really apt analogy because that's exactly what it's like.
I love that analogy. And, as you well know, I, for a long time, had I had to work through my own shame around the idea of working with a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Because I have a master's in poetry. I certainly think of myself as a writer. Mm-hmm. And yet there's a big difference between being a writer and being an author, first of all. And, as I often tell the story at the Hay House Writers Workshops, when I first shared what I thought was my book, my manuscript, with our friend Kelly, my editor, mm-hmm. she was very quick to say, there's a book in here, but this isn't a book.
Right.
And yes, you can take the time, and it will take time to learn the very specific formula for, a nonfiction, prescriptive nonfiction teaching memoir kind of book, which are really, my books are combo platters of those. Mm-hmm. She's like, you can learn the formula, or I can pair you with a writer. Mm-hmm. And the moment she said that, I wanted to die. The thought, the thought that I couldn't do this by myself. And again, it wasn't that I couldn't, it wasn't the best use of my time mm-hmm. to learn that formula. And the truth of the matter, what I've learned is that collaborating with you is such a tremendous joy. And I will be the first one to say that I'm not someone who has always played well with others. I've not always been the best collaborator. I'm very used to sort of being in my own little world and doing things on my own and very independent and getting things done by myself. Mm-hmm. But I have so enjoyed and learned so much from the process of collaboration with you.
Well, we've got it down to a science now.
We do.
At this point.
Book number 4 underway.
Yeah. It's sort of like, it's definitely a shorthand that we've developed. Yeah. And I just want to say that, I just want to give my own little program a plug, because just quickly, and then I want to talk about the book.
Yes, of course.
But just that, ghostwriting is expensive. Hiring a ghostwriter is expensive.
It is.
And that's that's one of the reasons why I'm starting my Finish Your Book program, because it teaches people that formula so
Right.
that they can go through the process without having to spend 5 figures
Right. They
on
can
a
do it themselves.
ghostwriter, and they can
Right.
learn it. While they're writing, they can learn it.
Right.
Because there are different kinds of writers, and I've experienced this with a lot of people where they know they're a writer, but they still, this learning how to structure this kind of book is just a whole nother thing.
It is.
And I think it's a lot to ask people to have both, and people expect themselves to just have that expertise just
Right.
off the
Which
top of their head.
I absolutely expected myself to have that. And so, what I've loved about our process from the beginning of time of working together first on Jump, the way that we would we come together on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
we talk, you record it. So it's my voice.
Yes.
We go back and forth about ideas. We go back and forth about the concepts, the exercises, all of it. And then lo and behold, via email, I receive a chapter.
Yeah.
And it is the most magical experience to open that Word document.
It's so funny. I've had other authors, explain it the same way. It's just like,
Yeah.
and then there's a chapter.
Right. And then there's a chapter. And I will say, and you've heard it yourself, Reed Tracy, president of Hay House, has said, no one in a million years would ever know that I didn't sit and painstakingly write my books, because he knows me so well. And he's like, it's your voice. It's you. Every word sounds like you. And someone actually just said to me the other day, she's been in one of my coaching programs, and she was listening to the audiobook of Jump. Excuse me, the audiobook of New Relationship Blueprint, the new book.
Okay, the new one.
And she was listening, and she's like, oh my God, like this, it sounds like you're just talking, not even reading an audiobook. It just sounds like you're talking.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, that's a tremendous compliment, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That has a lot to do with your reading skills, obviously, but it also has to do with the voice in the book and how we wrote it in a conversational way, which is something I've been preaching to people, that these kinds of books need to be conversational, but you still can't write them in the way that you speak exactly, because they won't be understood.
Right. And I think that there's, that's, I think, an interesting distinction, so my very first book is a book of poems, and I self-published it. And that's a different kind of book. It's a more, writerly book or literary book, or however you want to say that. It's a very different feel. It's just a very different animal. But these subsequent books, I do believe, need to be just very accessible in language that way.
People, I think the teaching, what we call the teaching memoir format, which is really a self-help book with some personal stories, is really the only kind of self-help book anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to just be lectured at throughout the entire book. Nobody wants that. So, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and it was interesting because, as because you know all my stories, so after I self-published the book of poems, then Reed came to me and said, now you need to write a real book. And so when I set about writing Jump, there was still a part of me, even though, and Jump essentially follows the through line of me leaving my marriage and being on the other side of it. But there was still a part of me that was like, well, I'm not the expert. I don't, how do I go and tell people how to do this kind of thing? And Reed was really in the show, don't tell, really in the place of you sharing your story is what is going to support other people in being able to make change. And I can't tell you, and I know you know this because you see it happening live.
Yeah.
The connection that happens simply by me sharing my story, my truth, whether it's in a book, whether it's on stage, that is what, that resonance is what makes all the difference. And I never really understood the way that, I thought my story is my story. Who's going to relate? Or who's going to, what are they going to get out of my story per se? And yet the more specific we are, the more universal it becomes, because everyone will come up to me and say, I found myself inside your story, essentially. And that's why I think it's so important for us all to share our stories. Yes, there are the themes out there that keep being repeated, but what makes it different is our own personal, unique experience and take on those themes.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because
Yeah.
so many people have that same fear that, who am I to do this? And yet there's something very resonant in their story for other people.
Yes.
And you do have to figure out how to package it, make it
Yep.
work. But yeah, once you do, it's golden. So let's talk about, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something?
No, go ahead.
Let's talk about the new relationship blueprint, because I learned a lot from
So did
working
I.
with you on this book. Yeah, I know, right? You learn as you teach. What's your elevator speech? What are you telling people about the book to give people a primer?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really the book I would have liked to have read that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
When embarking on a new relationship after the one that fell apart. So I'll often say, this is the handbook, the guidebook for being in a relationship after the one that fell apart or broke your heart, how to really teaching you how to do it again without doing it again.
Yeah.
And then the bonus is that if you get your hands on this book before you've gotten into that relationship that falls apart, if you're one of the lucky ones to really do this work earlier in your life than I did, you get to actually do it on your own terms from the get-go. You get to really learn how to show up as you in relationship from the get-go. Because what I find in myself and in the thousands of people I've coached across the board, it really comes down to how to be in relationship without losing yourself. Because so many of us have been through the experience of feeling like we disappeared inside of a relationship, and how to come back and get our ground and not think that the only way to do that is by being completely on our own. And in fact, I tried that. I thought, I was done after my divorce. I am not doing this again. I'm going it alone. And the truth of the matter is we are relational beings. We're going to find ourselves in relationship. And as you and I talked a lot about this, whether it's intimate partnership or not, our stuff is going to emerge in friendships, with parents, with siblings, with coworkers. Like it's there. And there's only so much work on ourselves and healing we can do alone in a vacuum in isolation. Because believe me, I thought after a couple of years post-divorce, I thought, I'm good. I'm healed. I'm woman, hear me roar. I got no more triggers. I'm great. And then what happened? I got to see that the triggers, are still there. My stuff is my stuff.
Yeah.
And every relationship becomes an opportunity for me to, as I often like to say, it's like what do you win when you win the video game? You win the advanced level of the video game,
Right.
So we're constantly being given that opportunity. And as, and in the book very clearly saying, we have to stop looking at all of this like it's a problem or like there's something wrong with us. If we're not in constant harmony, or if there are triggers, or if there are differences, we have to learn to cozy up to conflict. We have to learn how to be in acceptance of what is instead of fighting it, because that will create our own suffering.
Yeah. And we have this fantasy idea of what a good relationship is, that two people are always in harmony, like you said.
Right.
And they don't have any differences. They agree on absolutely everything.
Right.
And and it's just no such thing. It doesn't exist.
No.
So let's talk about the mirroring, because some people probably don't know this. The mirror aspect of that, and what a trigger actually is.
Yeah. So the simplest way I think to talk about it is to first realize that there are parts of ourselves that we've made a decision around denying or disowning. And it's really anything that we're quick to say, I'm not that, but we point the finger at someone else. So these qualities like lazy or irresponsible, speaking for a friend.
Yes, I don't know who that is. I don't know who has those.
Right. Right. So
wherever
anything
she
we're
is.
quick to say, right, exactly. Anything we're quick to say, like, I'm not that, but we will point the finger at someone else to say that they are.
I just pointed my finger at you, so I think, uh-oh.
I know, it's funny. So the idea here is what we disown is going to be presented in someone else close to us. It's going to present, and this is why the people closest to us trigger us the most. So the important piece to remember here, though, for anyone that this is really new for, is not to get caught up in the behavior, but to look for the quality. So I'll often use my ex-husband as an example because it's just easy. So I disown lazy. Mm-hmm. And he shows up and is essentially dictionary definition of lazy. He doesn't want to work. Mm-hmm. And that's what has me righteously pointing the finger. He's lazy. So, and it's easy for me to say I'm not lazy because I not only work, but I have the overachieving workaholic tendency in me.
Right.
Which is really the compensation, the way we overcompensate for the existence of the quality within us that we don't want.
Right. So you work harder to make sure that you are not lazy.
Exactly.
You can't stand lazy.
Exactly.
Right.
So the goal here, though, for the impulse of the soul is to be whole. So in order to be whole, we have to reclaim these parts of ourselves we've disowned. And the people around us become mirrors showing us the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see. So the sooner I'm able to actually own and integrate, I am lazy, which, believe me, 5 years ago, I couldn't say that sentence without my entire body feeling like it was on fire. But it's owning and integrating lazy and not getting hung up on the behavior and finding my version of lazy. So my version of lazy is sometimes on a Tuesday afternoon, I'll lay on the sofa and binge watch 5 episodes of my favorite TV show. Mm-hmm. That's my lazy. And then find the gift in the lazy. So it helps me relax, rejuvenate, cry, laugh, rest, whatever it is. Then I don't have to push away lazy and I don't have to draw it toward me. Now, the important thing also to remember is I don't have to like his behavior or anyone else's behavior. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I can have compassion for the quality of lazy because I know I have it too. Mm-hmm. And I can know that I'm lazy and I'm overachieving. I'm both. We are all always both. We are all everything.
Right. So
and
you're more balanced.
Right. Yeah. And that's the important point to remember. Like, I have the capacity to be lazy. I'm not lazy 24/7.
Right.
But I have the capacity to be lazy, just mm-hmm. like we all do.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm trying to formulate the question that I want to ask. Mm-hmm. You were talking about cozying up to conflict.
Yeah.
Which I think was a big one for me while we were writing this, which I probably didn't even tell you. But I just, was thinking, yeah, you know what? Of course we're going to have triggers. I've been trying to release my triggers, and I'm like, you know what? That's kind of a losing battle. I mean, it's good to be aware of them and to try not to go off, when we are triggered, we tend to become irrational and we overreact to things. So I don't want to do that. But at the same time, the triggers are going to be there.
Yes.
they're going to be there.
Yes.
And I have to make peace with that. And in relationship with someone else, if I am feeling uncomfortable with something that's happening in the relationship, I have to be willing to step up and say something, as opposed to just pushing it under the rug until you have so much dirt under the rug that your rug is almost up to the ceiling. And that's what
Yes.
happens in all these relationships. And it's happened in many of mine.
Right.
where you just, and then one day what happens is there's an explosion.
Yes. It's a blowout. Yeah.
Right. Which is sort of what happened for you. I mean,
Yeah.
Something happens to either you blow up yourself or something blows up for you, like
Yes.
in your case,
Yeah.
to force us to be different, to deal differently, to be more authentic, right?
Yes. So what I would say about this is, so I definitely think that we think that there are parts of ourselves we have to hide in order to be loved and accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like what I was talking about before with those disowned qualities, it can be something like that, or it can be a skeleton in the closet, a secret, something that we feel, if they knew this about me, they wouldn't love me. If they knew this about me, they wouldn't accept me. So we begin, and this can link to going all the way back to childhood around what's the way I'm going to package myself to be digestible to someone else.
Right.
And then we learn very early on, not to rock the boat. We learn how to people please. We learn how to peacekeep. And we start getting this idea that differences or conflict is wrong or bad. But there is a way to stay in connection, even in conflict, even in differences. And I do think I think it's actually like a significant, even kind of like revelatory piece in the book.
I think it is too.
Yeah, because I think most people are not used to looking at it that way. And we're so used to going the black or white. Like if there's this much difference or if there's this much problem, we have to break up. Like we'll go right there. And, it's interesting. I don't even know if you saw this. About a week before the book came out, I actually put a video in my free Facebook group talking about the fact that it was really ironic that this book was coming out, because this has been a really challenging year inside my own relationship. And the irony being that, for anyone listening who doesn't know, in the traditional publishing process, the manuscript gets handed into the publisher, about a year ahead of time before the book actually is held in our hands.
Right.
So 2 weeks after I handed the book into Hay House, hell broke loose for me here.
Oh,
and
no.
I needed to really take my own medicine. I needed to really put my money where my mouth was around what I was teaching, and I had to learn it again. Right? So it's so interesting even having this conversation with you, because then I can feel in my body is that it's not numb. It's more that like the lack of sensation in a good way, because as you know me so well, there was a time I would not have revealed this.
Yes.
Right? So there was a time I would have kept the front up of everything's perfect, everything's fine. I want to project the image of perfection. I want to manage your perception of me. I want you to see me through a particular lens only. Yeah. And what I started to realize was that in order to stay in integrity and in congruency with congruency with myself, not incongruency,
right.
Congruency with myself, I actually needed to come clean and just share this. And it's actually been interesting that with each of my books, I have returned to the steps for other things than the thing I wrote the book about, per se, like in the moment. So with Jump, I wrote it about leaving my marriage. I used it in leaving my Hay House job. I used the exact same 10 steps. You know, I have revisited the steps in Worthy in a similar way for something else. And then the new relationship blueprint steps, I wrote it and was living it, and then was, after the book was written, reflecting back on it, was able to use the same steps in my current relationship to support me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I think is really excuse me, great for people who are thinking of being authors, because you know they feel like they have to have it perfect
Right
before they can write the book. But the truth is that we teach what we most need to learn.
We do.
I've always found that to be true. And every book that is brought to me as a ghostwriter is something that I need to learn. Every time.
Every time.
It's something.
That's
There's
awesome.
something in it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's like when I was an actor, it was the same way with roles. Every role was something that I needed to integrate in myself. And and yeah, in every circumstance, we have to relearn these things, because we spend our formative years learning the opposite.
That's right.
And it's, you know, when you learn what we learn in the formative years has a lot of stickiness. It's it's very sticky stuff.
Very, very sticky stuff. Exactly. Yeah.
And in order to do anything else, we have to consciously, very, very strategically and consciously put other steps into play.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen as automatically as the less balanced approach that we learn.
Right. Right. It's very true.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I want to look at the book. Is there anything that you specifically want to talk about in relation to the book that I might not think to ask you?
The only thing I might say is that I've so loved hearing from people who've been reading it, who are really finding the exercises so valuable in being able to sort out their own relationship patterns and behaviors, so that they can shift them moving forward. Realizing, realizing what I've been saying all along, that we're so quick to want to say, it's about the other person, point the finger, blame. If only he or she was or wasn't, did or didn't, whatever. Or for me, which is often for me, it's like, it would be so much easier if I was by myself. I often say, like, alone is my mistress.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is that it's all going to funnel down into the relationship between me and me, you and you. That relationship isn't meant to save us. It's meant to grow us.
Yes.
It is a curriculum. I mean, that's really how I think about it. It is a curriculum, and it's not for the faint of heart. If you're really going to dive in and do and come together in the healing that's available, when two people are willing participants in getting sort of in the crucible together.
Yeah. And I was thinking, there are a lot of people who always blame themselves for what's going on in the relationship if something isn't working. And that is still about the relationship between you and you.
Yes.
But it's about learning to love yourself more, so that you aren't always taking on all of the the responsibility
Right, because the impulse is either to take all the responsibility or to take none.
To take none, right.
Right.
We tend to
So,
be either
right.
or.
And so the goal is also to say, okay, what is mine and what is yours? What is mine to take responsibility? Like, where do I end and where do you begin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that piece is important.
You already touched on the reframe relationship as spiritual path.
Yeah.
So that it's a curriculum. It
Yeah.
is a way to grow us rather than to
It
save
is.
us, because we can only save ourselves.
We can only save ourselves.
Yeah. But one of the things that I think is most radical about the book is the idea that we need to be more selfish.
Yes. It's like my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah. So talk about that. Yeah.
I think selfish gets a bad rap. And, again, just hearkening back to the disowned quality conversation earlier, we're so quick to push away selfish, and we're quick to point a finger at someone else. He's so selfish. She's so selfish. And we are quick to deny our own selfishness because we've made it wrong or bad.
Right.
And I'll often say that I think selfish, self-love, and self-care are three sisters whose job it is to support us in honoring ourselves. So to me, selfish is the way that we actually make ourselves a priority and we really know our non-negotiables, because the bottom line is we've been abandoning ourselves for too long. And we've been letting the other have the big juicy steak or tofu. and we've been taking the scraps or the crumbs. And so, first of all, it's a radical idea to even consider ourselves, let alone
At
what
all.
I'm saying. Right, exactly. It's a radical idea to consider ourselves at all. Not even bringing in what I'm saying, which is consider yourself first.
Yes.
So check in with yourself first. Stop taking the other person's temperature. Stop checking their weather. Check in with yourself first about what you want, what you need, what you desire. Really know your own limits around what it is that you want to have in your life and what you don't. And then from there, begin expressing from that place. This is radical. This is terrifying for many people because we're so not used to, and we've actually been taught in some way, it's not ladylike to do that, or some version of you should stay quiet, you should stay invisible, you should stay small, you shouldn't shine so bright, some way in which we've dimmed ourselves or lessened ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we acquiesce.
And we have this belief that our partner is supposed to fill all our needs.
Right. Which I personally think like the biggest.
Crazy, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
When you think about it
setup.
logically, yeah, it's completely crazy.
Yeah, it's a really difficult setup. And clearly, Disney and movies and music and books and all that haven't helped the matter.
No.
And a big proponent of this work too is helping people understand that we really need to learn how to meet our own needs. It doesn't mean that there's no needs that the relationship is going to meet. Sure. But first look at, when there's an unmet need, look to yourself first. Don't look to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me that was a big eye-opener.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that the book does so successfully is it teaches people how to do that, how to begin to, it really is a reframe. It really is a different way of thinking that, and it makes a lot of sense to me too, that, if you are not looking to this other person to fill all of your needs, then you're not disappointed all the time. And I
That's
think,
right.
so many relationships end because people have that belief that the other
Well,
person is
because
supposed to do that.
expectations aren't met.
Right.
Because expectations aren't met. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And and I love, what's the thing that you say that gosh, now am I going to remember it, that if you are taking care of yourself, that the relationship will,
Yeah.
that you're also taking care of the relationship. It's
I
not
do.
it's not an either or situation.
It's not an either or. So we have to remember it's a both and. So it's not either I take care of me or take care of you. And I'm never talking about, when I'm saying be selfish or make yourself a priority, I'm never saying disregard another.
Right.
It's the both and of make yourself a priority. And when you do, you're actually more able to give.
Mm-hmm.
You're more able to have it be like the circle, the cycle, and have it flow better. And when we're taking good care of ourselves, we are being a good steward for the relationship. When we're being true, when we're being honest, when we're communicating clearly and directly, it's always going to be better for the relationship.
Yes. How much do you think that your partner has to be on board with this stuff?
That's a great question, and I get it a lot. And, obviously there's tremendous benefit, and I have couples who are doing the work together, which is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, and I've seen it happen, it just happened the other day, I saw it happen, that one partner was doing the work and was already able to see the change in the dynamic between them, because by doing the work, the rules of engagement were shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also encouraging to the other person who wasn't necessarily doing the work, having her open up in a different way.
Mm.
So I love the idea of, doing it together as partnership. I love the idea of doing it alone in the container of relationship. And I also love the idea of doing the work on your own if you're single and have sworn off relationship or are dating or looking
Right.
for love, whatever context, because again, it's going to come back to you. But
Yeah.
I do see that there's tremendous value in doing this work regardless of where you are in your relationship journey.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great if you're dating, because it really sets you up to start a relationship on the right foot,
Yeah. I mean, I said to someone the other day, I think someone who called into my radio show, about dating. And I'm like, what if you actually showed up on your first date as you?
Yeah.
And she was, taken aback. And I said, just think about how much energy you'll have if you're not concocting a persona, if you're not trying to present someone who he will like, but if you're really just showing up, here I am. And I also say, people might say, oh, that's very easy if you're just starting out in a dating situation. But like we say in the book, Marion Woodman talked about having several marriages within her decades-long marriage to the same man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
So, the two of them had marriage 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And I'm a big believer in the possibility of that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if people can do that,
yeah,
it allows you to evolve within the relationship.
Exactly.
Rather than stick with a role that you took on from the first day.
Right. I mean, can you imagine like the upkeep? And we've all sort of been there, because then there's some kind of a bait and switch. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how many, I mean, the cliche, with our parents' generation the woman who put herself aside in a relationship and then at midlife was like, no, I can't do this anymore, and I'm leaving, and I'm going to go off and get a career or whatever.
Yep.
Or
Exactly.
go travel around the world or whatever she's going
Yep.
to do because she can't bear holding on to that false role anymore.
Exactly.
It gets to a point where you just can't do it.
You can't.
So as a result of the new relationship blueprint, book number 4 is being worked on as we speak. And this one it doesn't have a title yet.
It doesn't.
But it is about boundaries, which is something that's touched on in the new relationship blueprint. But the new book is going to just dive completely into boundaries and in all relationships.
Yes. Yes. To me, it seemed the perfect next step to take after relationship, because what I find is the number one reason people don't set a boundary is they don't know what to say, and they don't know how to say it, and they don't really, and really I would say sort of like the secret to setting boundaries that most people don't know is it's not about the other person respecting or upholding the boundary that we set. It's up to us. So when we set a boundary, it's up to us to maintain it. And we have to really realize that when a boundary is crossed, we're essentially crossing our own boundary by allowing it and by enabling it to be crossed. And so from that perspective, it's important to understand that, again, we have so much more power than we think we have. And we have the power of choice. And I can't tell you how many clients have said to me, I set a boundary, but he or she just kept doing X, Y, Z, right? And it's like, well, of course they did. They're always going to keep doing X, Y, Z. And so we have to be willing to come back to what I like to call like the company line of around the boundary, and then renaming it and restating it clearly and directly as our stand. And once that's a muscle we have to really learn how to flex, because again, going back to everything we've been talking about here, it takes quite a lot to, first of all, know those limits, know our limits around, what we won't do, what we won't accept, what we won't tolerate, and then have the willingness to actually clearly name it, and clearly name how we'll take care of ourselves if that keeps happening.
Right. And I've been on the other end of it, where someone set a boundary with me and then I kept forgetting to honor it out of habitual stuff, and I am actually fine if she says to me, Melanie, if you talk too much, if you monopolize the conversation too much, which is an habitual problem that I have to get over, that she will say, I will interrupt you and either tell what I want to say, or I will end the conversation. And if she said that to me, I would be like, I get it. I totally get it. And I actually want her to do that. I want her to catch me,
Yeah. Interesting.
Because then I learn, I will learn how to stop doing that so much. If I'm caught, rather than hers sitting there and then seething for it and then blowing up at me later.
And
which is worse for me, really.
Right. And so again, it all loops back around to what we've been talking about all together, which is the way that things end up exploding, the way that things start coming out sideways when we don't tell the truth, when we're not making the healthy choices for ourselves, and the way that we end up creating chaos even to avoid that truth.
Right. So much more destructive to the relationship ultimately.
So much more destructive than
if we just
actually
upfront said what we needed to say.
Say the thing.
Right.
Say the thing.
And how
So
many times is it not as big a deal to the other person as we think it's going to be? I mean,
almost all the time.
sometimes it is a big deal to them, and
Yeah, sometimes. So, but
sometimes it
almost.
creates conflict. But a lot of the time, it's really not as big a deal.
We're the ones who are awfulizing and catastrophizing, along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to look at my time here. Oh, we have actually been talking a half an hour.
I'm not surprised. We're good at this.
We are. Listen, thanks so much for doing this. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Oh, my
And
goodness, of course.
I hope everybody will go get this book because it's a source of pride for both of us, and
Mm,
it's
it is.
it's 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 really, yeah, I just can't say enough good about it. Um, so thank you again, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes.